She walked through the gates of Cresthill University with trembling steps, her heart pounding harder with every curious stare. Her name was Ayla, new in town, alone, and painfully aware she didn't fit in. Not here. Not anywhere. Whispers trailed behind her like ghosts, some cruel, others mocking, but none kind. From the moment she stepped into that auditorium, laughter erupted. Not because she was clumsy, not because she said anything wrong, but simply because she existed. And yet, what no one saw in that moment of brutal humiliation was the razor-sharp mind hiding behind her quiet eyes. A mind that could outpace professors, dismantle complex theories, and challenge the very foundations of what this elite school believed in. This isn't a story about pity. It's a story about transformation, about a soul who refused to be defined by their pain. And when Ayla decided she wouldn't just endure, she would dominate, she lit a spark that would turn the entire campus upside down. But even genius has its enemies. And hers were watching. From the very first lecture, it was clear Ayla wasn't like the others. And not just because of the way she looked, or the endless rumors that had already begun to circulate. It was her silence, her unshakable calm. While others scrambled for notes, stumbled over answers, or played to the professors for praise, Ayla listened, calculated, waited. Then came the day of the Foundational Logic Challenge, a tradition known across Cresthill as an intellectual gauntlet. Freshmen were pitted against each other, their performance determining their academic status for the rest of the year. No one expected Ayla to even try. In fact, several students openly bet on how badly she'd fail. But when her name was called and she stepped onto the stage, something changed in the air. The snickers faded. The room leaned in. She glanced at the complex equation projected behind her, nodded once, and then, without hesitation, solved it. Not with notes, not with a calculator. From memory. The auditorium fell silent. Then someone clapped. Then another. Until the room erupted in stunned applause, cut short by the sharp voice of Professor Holden, who narrowed his eyes with thinly veiled suspicion. "Who gave you the solution?" he asked, more accusation than question. Ayla met his gaze, unwavering. "I didn't need one." And that moment, just that, sparked a wildfire. Jealousy, rage, disbelief. In the days that followed, students whispered not out of mockery, but out of fear. Professors questioned her background, dug into her records. Some even accused her of hacking the university's academic database. But there was nothing to find. No trickery, no shortcuts, just brilliance. But the more Ayla shone, the darker the shadows around her grew. Because there were people at Cresthill who thrived on control, who saw her as a threat to their power. And they weren't about to let a first year, especially her, upend everything they'd built. Now Ayla faced a new kind of test. Not one of intellect but survival. Because power once threatened bites back. And behind closed doors, they had already begun to plan her downfall. Whispers turned to schemes. Ayla had humiliated them just by being better. That wasn't something the elites of Cresthill took lightly. The so-called Pinnacle Circle, a secretive group of legacy students, children of senators, CEOs, and tech billionaires, had made their decision. Ayla needed to be broken. Publicly. Permanently. They started with isolation. One by one, Ayla's lab partners dropped out. Tutors stopped showing up. Her access to key campus systems mysteriously disappeared. Assignments vanished from portals, only to reappear marked incomplete. Professors began grading her work with a suspiciously harsh hand, refusing to explain their critiques. She tried to report it, but her emails went unanswered. Her advisor was always unavailable. The message was loud and clear. She was on her own, and yet she endured. What they didn't understand was that Ayla had survived much worse before arriving at Cresthill. Growing up in a town that treated her like a mistake. Being told again and again to shrink herself to make others comfortable. She had mastered the art of surviving storms. This was just another one. But one night things escalated. Ayla returned to her dorm after a late-night coding session to find her room ransacked. Books shredded. Her laptop smashed. A note taped to her mirror. "You don't belong here." For the first time she trembled. Not because of fear but because of rage. Righteous, burning rage. They wanted her to break. To quit. To disappear quietly so they could go back to their perfect little kingdom. Instead she made a choice. She would no longer play defense. She would strike back with the one weapon they could never match. Her mind. She pulled an old backup drive from her duffel bag. Inside were schematics she had designed back in high school. Blueprints for a neural compression algorithm that could change the future of computing. She'd always told herself it wasn't ready, that it needed more time. But now it had to be enough. As the campus slept, Ayla started building something in the shadows. Something that would shake the foundations of Cresthill's tech world, and make her enemies beg for mercy. But just as her plan began to form, someone unexpected reached out with a warning. A message scrawled across a physics textbook left on her desk. "They're watching you. And they're afraid." Fear is a strange thing. It can silence revolutions or ignite them. And Ayla had just learned that hers was not a solo war. Someone else knew. Someone inside the very system plotting her destruction. The warning wasn't just a message. It was a lifeline. But trusting the unknown could be just as dangerous as trusting no one. Still, Ayla had no time for hesitation. She worked tirelessly night after night, pouring every ounce of brilliance into her prototype. Her dorm became a fortress of code and calculations. She barely slept, barely ate. But every line of code she typed was a strike against the power that tried to erase her. And then, it worked. The prototype, a compact self-learning algorithm that could compress neural network processing by 80%, was alive, faster, cleaner, smarter than anything Cresthill's prestigious tech labs had ever produced. Ayla smiled for the first time in weeks. This wasn't just a victory, it was a revolution. But revolutions make noise. Within days, she noticed the surveillance. Students she'd never seen before watching her from across the library. Faculty members suddenly dropping in to her study halls. Her prototype, stored offline, was accessed remotely twice. They were trying to steal it. So she encrypted it behind a firewall of puzzles only she could solve, each layer rooted in personal memories no one else could possibly know. The code became not just a masterpiece, but a confession of who she was. Every piece of pain, every rejection, every humiliation, turned into power. Then another message. This one wasn't cryptic. It was blunt. "Meet me at the West Archives. Midnight. Come alone. I can help." She stood there for hours that night, in the flickering lights of the forgotten wing of the library. The air smelled of old paper and dust. Time slowed. And then he stepped out of the shadows. Adrian Voss, top of his class, son of the dean, and member of the Pinnacle Circle. "I warned you," he said, "because I admire you. But I can't protect you anymore. They're not just coming for your code. They want you gone for good." Ayla stared at him, her breath shallow. "What does gone mean, Adrian?" He hesitated. "They've hired someone." And just like that, Ayla's fight turned deadly. The word echoed through her mind like a cold wind through shattered glass. Hired someone. This wasn't just about sabotage anymore. This was personal, ruthless, real. Ayla wasn't just facing academic politics or social cruelty. She was now a target. Adrian's warning rattled her. But it didn't break her. If anything, it sharpened her resolve. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because I know what it feels like," Adrian said quietly. "To be brilliant. And alone. But I also know what happens when you threaten their control. And you, Ayla, are a threat bigger than any of us ever anticipated." He handed her a flash drive. "This is access to the Pinnacle Circle's private channel logs. You'll find your name in there. More times than you'll be comfortable with. But it'll show you how far they're willing to go." Then he walked away, vanishing into the shadows like a ghost who had broken his own chains. Ayla didn't hesitate. Back in her dorm, behind locked doors and a triple-layer VPN, she opened the files. What she read made her blood run cold. They had detailed reports on her. Timetables, psychological profiles, access to her admissions file, even her medical records, sealed ones. Someone with power was feeding them everything. And at the center of it all, orchestrating the moves like a puppet master, was Dean Solon himself, the man who smiled during convocations, who shook her hand on the first day, who gave speeches about diversity and progress. He was the one who ordered her isolation. But why? The answer came in the form of an archived conversation from a year ago, a transcript between Solon and a venture capital firm. They were funding Cresthill's experimental AI department, the same department Ayla's algorithm would render obsolete. Billions in projected profits, threatened by a single student's brilliance. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about prejudice. It wasn't about the Pinnacle Circle's pride. It was about money. Ayla's mind raced. She needed a plan. Yes, because if they were willing to destroy her for threatening their empire, then taking her offline was just a means to an end. She reached for her backup drive, but it was gone. In its place, a single note on her keyboard. Too slow, genius. Games started. The drive was gone. Her life's work, her shield, her sword, vanished in a blink. Ayla sat frozen, staring at the note like it might morph into something less horrifying. But there was no doubt now. They had breached her last defense. The game wasn't starting. It had already begun, and she was 3 moves behind. Her hands trembled, but her mind didn't. This was no longer about proving herself. This was survival. And survival meant adaptation. If they had her prototype, they would try to dismantle it, or worse, claim it as their own. But Ayla had planned for the unthinkable. In every line of code, she'd planted markers, ghosts only she could recognize. Subtle anomalies that meant nothing to the untrained eye but everything to her. A digital fingerprint. If they tried to present it, she'd know. And more importantly, she could expose them. But she had to act before they buried her in silence. She needed help. Real help. Not from Adrian, whose hands were tied by bloodlines and legacies, but from someone who owed the system nothing. She thought of Professor Lena, the rogue AI theorist fired years ago for challenging Cresthill's corporate ties. Ayla had read her banned papers. Brilliant, unfiltered, and dangerous. It took hours of digging and one encrypted message posted to an old forum before Ayla got a reply. "I've been watching you. Meet me tomorrow. Bring everything you haven't lost yet." The meeting place was as unconventional as the woman herself, an abandoned observatory just outside campus. The air was thick with dust and forgotten dreams. And then she appeared. Lena, older now, eyes burning with defiance. "They think they've won," Lena said. "But they never understood what makes a mind like yours dangerous. It's not the code. It's the will. The refusal to fold." Ayla told her everything. The sabotage, the theft, the threats. Lena nodded slowly. "Then let's show them what happens when you corner a genius." They began rebuilding from scratch. Faster. Stronger. Hidden deep in a system off-grid, protected by layers of analog security. As they worked, Ayla felt something she hadn't in weeks: power. Not just the kind that came from intellect but from unity. But just as the new prototype neared completion, a red warning light blinked on Ayla's old device. It was a breach attempt, and it was coming from inside the Dean's private server. The Dean's private server. It wasn't just a breach, it was a declaration. They weren't hiding anymore. Whatever veil of secrecy had once masked their intentions was gone, replaced by raw, brazen aggression. Ayla stared at the blinking alert with a strange calm, like the eye of a hurricane watching its own destruction. "This isn't about control anymore," Lena said, narrowing her eyes. "It's war." They traced the intrusion to a subroutine masked within Cresthill's student health record system, an area Ayla's data should have never touched. That was the real horror. They weren't just trying to bury her code. They were going after her identity. Hidden in the data packets were falsified reports, claims of academic dishonesty, mental instability, even accusations of hacking school systems. Each lie meticulously placed, backed by fake evidence, and time-stamped to match real events. It was the perfect smear campaign. "They're rewriting your life," Lena muttered, her voice trembling with fury. "If this goes public, they won't need to expel you. They'll erase your future altogether." Ayla didn't flinch. "Then we beat them to the truth." She and Lena mobilized everything, pulling together logs, screenshots, encrypted chat records, and the digital fingerprints embedded in her stolen prototype. They compiled a dossier so damning, so meticulously cross-referenced, that it painted a picture far bigger than just Ayla's persecution. It exposed years of corruption, funding scandals, data manipulation, bribery. The Pinnacle Circle wasn't just a cabal of elite students. They were the mask of a much deeper rot within Cresthill's leadership. But leaking it wouldn't be enough. Not in a system built to protect itself. They needed eyes. Real ones. So Ayla did what she'd sworn never to do. She went public. Not through official channels, not to news outlets, but to the students themselves. She hijacked the university's anonymous campus livestream, a channel usually used for memes and gossip, and spoke directly to them. She didn't ask for sympathy. She showed them facts. And when she ended the stream with the words, "If they can do this to me, they can do it to any of you," something cracked. The silence didn't last long. Within minutes, the campus lit up in chaos. But amid the tidal wave of student outrage, Ayla received one final message. A private email from the dean himself. "You've made your choice. So have I. Enjoy your last week here." The countdown had begun. 1 week. That's all the dean had given her. 1 week until the system would move in and sweep her out. Quietly, decisively. They wouldn't make the mistake of another public confrontation. No, this time it would be an official notice of expulsion, masked under security concerns, or violations of academic integrity. Clean. Silent. But Ayla had no intention of going quietly. By now, the campus had split in two. On one side were the loyalists, the legacy students, the Pinnacle Circle, the administration's pawns clinging to their illusion of control. On the other, a movement was rising. Students, hundreds of them, who had seen the truth, who realized that Ayla wasn't an anomaly, but a mirror. And they didn't like what they saw in their reflection. They called themselves the Nulls. A name Ayla hadn't chosen but couldn't ignore. Their symbol, a broken chain over a circuit. Their message, burn down the lie. For the first time, the power on campus began to shift. Classrooms emptied during lectures given by compromised professors. Questions were shouted in board meetings. Flyers, encrypted QR codes. Even graffiti called for a full audit of Cresthill's leadership. The Pinnacle Circle tried to fight back, with rumors, propaganda, digital sabotage, but the tide had turned. The truth had awakened something that fear couldn't silence. But with visibility came vulnerability. Ayla's room was no longer safe. Her devices were constantly pinged. Her firewalls tested day and night. So she moved underground, literally. Lena had secured an old storm shelter beneath the east wing of the abandoned robotics building. There, hidden beneath years of dust and discarded tech, they built their final move. The new prototype. Not just an evolution of her original algorithm, but something far more radical. An open-source architecture capable of reshaping neural computing worldwide. She called it Iris. Designed to grow, adapt, and remain untraceable by corporate control. She would give it away. To everyone. All at once. But it had to launch before the end of the week. Before they could silence her. Before they could discredit the message by eliminating the messenger. Then, just as the final upload node was being installed, Ayla received a second email. This one didn't come from the dean. Came from her father, whom she hadn't spoken to in 7 years. "They contacted me. They want me to convince you to walk away. I didn't raise you to be a pawn, Ayla. But this war might cost you everything. The past has a way of creeping back when the future's on the line." Ayla stared at the email, heart pounding. Her father's name, the same man who once told her that she'd never belong, that the world wasn't ready for someone like her, was now a variable in the equation. She hadn't spoken to him since the night she left home with nothing but a suitcase and a vision. "This war might cost you everything." The words echoed in her mind. But what he didn't understand was, she had already lost everything. Her privacy, her safety, her peace. And what she had gained in return was far more precious. Clarity, purpose. The kind that couldn't be undone with a threat or plea. She didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, she doubled down. The final build of Iris was almost complete. Its architecture was elegant, lean, self-protecting. A digital wildfire waiting for a spark. All it needed was one synchronized upload and it would be distributed across the globe. Every open server, every willing device, every corner of the internet where freedom still breathed. The nulls were ready. 1,000 students across dozens of campuses. Coders, engineers, hackers, artists. All aligned for one purpose. To make the system choke on its own silence. But the dean wasn't finished playing. That night, Ayla returned to the shelter to find Lena missing. No signs of forced entry. No message. No clue. Just a solitary item on the work table. A white envelope with Ayla's name, written in trembling pen. Inside was a photo. Lena bound, gagged, bruised, and a note. "End the release, or she disappears." Ayla's vision blurred. For all the power, all the knowledge, all the momentum she had built, they had found the one soft place left inside her. And they had struck hard. She could stop the launch, save Lena, or go forward, and risk everything. But as she stood there, torn between fear and fire, her device vibrated. It was a video feed. Lena, bloodied but alive, looked straight into the lens. And she whispered, "Do it anyway." The screen went black. Ayla clenched her fists, jaw locked in pure fury. Her choice was made. But what she didn't know, what no one could have predicted, was that someone else was already moving. A hidden piece in this deadly game had just stepped onto the board. In every system, there's always a flaw. One blind spot, one vulnerability hidden beneath layers of arrogance. Ayla had been hunting that flaw for weeks. But she hadn't realized. She was the flaw. To them, she had always been the unpredictable element, the one variable that refused to be defined by their equations. And now, she had become something far worse. Catalyst. The night of the launch came like a storm held in suspense. The underground shelter was silent, save for the hum of machines and the rhythmic pulse of code weaving through cyberspace. Across the world, the nulls were poised, one keystroke away from releasing Iris to the wild. And then it happened. Not a countdown, not a press conference, just a whisper from Ayla into the camera of her old laptop. No more chains. The command was sent. Iris detonated across the digital sky. Silent, invisible, unstoppable. It danced across borders, wormed through firewalls, nested into devices. Not to control, not to destroy, but to liberate. An AI that couldn't be owned. A technology that couldn't be patented. A genius that couldn't be silenced. But freedom, as always, came at a price. Minutes later, the campus lights went dark. Emergency sirens howled. Full digital lockdown. The dean had activated Protocol Black, a clandestine security measure reserved for existential threats to university infrastructure. Ayla's access was revoked. The nulls were flagged as domestic disruptors. Arrest teams were mobilized. But then a breach. Not hers. A deeper one. Coming from inside the dean's private files. Live feeds from his office leaked. Emails. Transaction records. Vibe. Schematics. The hidden piece had moved. And its name was Adrian Voss. He had betrayed the circle. Publicly. "I learned from her," he said in a surprise campus-wide broadcast. "And now you all will too." The system lied. Ayla told the truth. "And I'm done being a puppet." The final nail struck the coffin. The dean resigned before the sun rose. Investigations ignited across Cresthill's donors and tech partners. Faculty scrambled to distance themselves from the fallout. And Ayla, she vanished. No trace, no footprint, only a legend. Some say she fled. Others say she's still out there, updating Iris, evolving it, watching. But everyone remembers what she said before disappearing. They tried to break me. All they did was build me stronger. Some stories don't end, they echo. Ayla's disappearance left more than silence. It left a scar across a system that had believed itself untouchable. Cresthill University would recover, yes, but it would never forget. Not the rebellion, not the reckoning, and certainly not her. She became more than a student, more than a name. She became a symbol, etched into underground forums, whispered in classrooms, immortalized in code. The girl who refused to fold. And though no one has seen her since, her creation, Iris, lives on, free, untethered. A reminder that one voice, even when ridiculed and humiliated, can set the world on fire. Now ask yourself, what would you do if the system turned on you? Would you break? Or would you rise? Because this wasn't the first war. And it won't be the last. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next story is already unfolding. And when it does, you'll want to be here. The world isn't ready for what's coming, but you will be.